Thank you for joining us today. We've had some great speakers throughout this year and stuff, and we haven't yet got to hear from anybody on the back end of it, like with GES, for example. So that's why I met Julia a couple weeks ago on a different Zoom call, and I asked if she would tell us more of what's going on with those guys, so we can do more to help our clients out. And she was gracious enough to join us and tell us all the great new programs and all the stuff that the GES is working on. So she has got a nice little presentation to talk about that. But first, I'm going to thank our sponsors for the exhibit company, IO and B Matrix and Classic Exhibits for helping us to do all this stuff. And IO is Image Options, sorry. That was the acronym. So I will let her take over, and welcome, Julia.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, Ross and I started talking a few weeks ago, and we were kind of trying to decide exactly what the content would be, and et cetera. And I've done a lot of speaking this spring about a lot of things that have been happening, and usually you can use your talking points 2 or 3 times. Well, I'm sure what all of you have seen is that the environment is changing so rapidly right now. 2 months ago, we were talking about floor plan changes and how the floor plan social distancing or physical distancing had to take place, and what it was going to look like. And now an awful lot of that is moot. So I'm going to share with you some things that we are seeing out there, some resources that you can go to so that you can see what organizers are thinking and hearing about from the associations with whom they work most closely, and give your clients, our mutual clients, the exhibitors, good guidance. Because if there's ever a time that we all need to work together as one cohesive exhibiting ecosystem, it's now. And so we're seeing a lot of really, really unique partnerships these days. Everybody has taken this time while we were, in what, not hibernation, but shut down, to look at all of our processes. I'm sure you were doing some of the same. And so with that, next slide, please. We're going to take a look at some of the trends that we're seeing, and they're changing rapidly, as I mentioned. So obviously, with all the shows that are happening in the 3rd and 4th quarter, there are much shorter planning cycles right now. And this is putting pressure on organizers, venues, and all suppliers, whether it's an official contractor, whether it's, a producer, a designer, whatever. And then the next piece is what I alluded to, that the changes in the health and safety guidelines are so rapid right now that it's creating a lot of confusion. And a lot of show organizers are hesitant to print real specifics right now, other than to say that they are following the guidance of the facility, the state, et cetera, and more to come, right? So that makes it a little complicated for you if you're, trying to give guidance to your client. It means that we have to be constantly being flexible. I know I was on a call this morning planning for a show in New Orleans, and we were busy taking the one-way arrows off the floor plan because, the one-way aisles are no longer required there. So along with this, of course, and I'm sure you've heard this from a lot of your clients, as we have, is that exhibitors in particular are suffering from virtual and hybrid exhaustion. Hybrid works for a lot of things. It works better for some of them than others. And, it has expanded the reach of many events to include attendees that might not be able to physically attend. It's been a little more complicated providing the kind of contact, ROI, engagement, et cetera, that exhibitors are looking for. So the good news is that exhibit space is selling right now. The question is, will the attendees follow? And again, the good news is there've been a couple of, excellent examples just in the last couple of weeks, World of Concrete being one of them. We just finished Bassmasters in Texas and they had, I think 140,000 or more attendees. But, you know, there are many shows that are subject to, you know, the personalities and the personas of the attendees and the exhibitors. And so they're not all going to behave exactly the same. We've certainly had a lot of opportunities for reinvention. And I hope that you've been doing this, as I mentioned, during this time. Value engineering, I think, is really critical. I mean, you know, one of the examples I like to use with some of my clients is I've never heard an exhibitor leave a show saying they had their best show ever because the entrance unit was the most amazing thing they ever saw, or because the aisle signs were, you know, four-sided and rotated. So, you know, I think it's a time for all of us to really look at everything we are doing for our clients and decide in this period where will most likely have reduced budgets, what is really value add, what contributes to ROI, what can be measured, and what is just the wow factor. And there might be a little less wow factor for a while, which leads to data being really critical, right? So, you know, this is something we've been, you know, preaching to our clients, and certainly many contractors have been gathering and sharing all kinds of data. I think the most critical thing right now is that the data is really fresh because things are changing so quickly. So if you're surveying, if your client's surveying, if they're getting data from shows in which they participate, it's really critical that the data be really current because the trends are changing so quickly. I think hybrid in many cases is transitioning to more of a 365, you know, days a year community builder versus necessarily just an add-on for the show. And as I mentioned before, behaviors, you know, vary by industry, location, venue, and timing right now. So, next slide. So exhibitor trends, and this is where I'd love to hear from you, you know, whether it's right now you jump in or whether it's, you know, after I finish the presentation, because we're obviously hearing from your clients, but some of the trends that we are seeing right now is exhibitors waiting longer to make decisions about whether or not they will participate. Some of them are taking smaller footprints. Some of them are spending less within that footprint. In some cases, there's an interest in turnkey packages or rentals for their initial return into the market. You know, some of them are not, you know, leaping in to do you know, something custom right now. So having options that are at different price points is really important. There are certainly major corporations that still have travel and budget restrictions in place that, you know, are, you know, impacting their ability to participate in events depending upon the timing. And then this is something that we've talked about a lot, which is that some of the budget that has been dedicated to exhibitions in the past has shifted to other marketing channels. And the big question is whether or not we get that back. And I see Gina commented, we're seeing clients attending shows, but budgets are way tighter and material costs have gone up. So yeah, we're all getting squeezed right now, right? So, you know, we're seeing exactly the same thing where many of our clients are coming back wanting to renegotiate their contracts when they're actually bringing something to us that is worth less. And we're all really caught in that situation right now. You know, the good news is there's a real hunger for the connection of face-to-face. As I mentioned, I don't think probably many of your clients would opt for the virtual option if they can do face-to-face, or they want to do a combination of the two. And this I'd like to hear from you too. For a while, we were doing a lot of redesign of elements for, you know, lower contact and more physical thing. Now with everything opening up, are your clients asking you to redesign the booths, or are you suggesting changing some of the elements for things like fewer touch screens? Or do you think that's all going to be gone within a couple of months? And then, you know, again, to get back into it, exhibitors, you know, are really focusing on ROI and ROE as well, you know, the return on experience, but ROI, I think, is going to be really key as they get back into the marketplace. Anyone want to add anything on what you're hearing from your clients?
I'll just say, like, we've been working on a booth lately, and some of the clients aren't even in the mindset of like COVID still. They're still like, want meeting rooms, or just not thinking of,
Right.
they want touch screens, or just not, I was like, who's gonna touch the screen? Is it gonna be your people, or are you gonna have them touch it?
Right.
So I have to lead them in that direction to say, like, hey, we have to think about this.
Well, and it may, quite honestly, Ross, it may depend upon the audience at the show, because, again, certain markets, certain profiles of attendees are all in, they're not worried about it. And then there are going to be others, that feel very differently about it. And so I think you have to think about, okay, what is a short-term fix because of the pandemic, and what might be a longer-term trend? And I think we'll probably look at some of that. So next slide. So who makes the rules? And this is one of the other things that's really confusing, right? So as you are giving your guidance to your clients, don't assume that what will be approved for a show because, for instance, that Texas is wide open, or that California is requiring this or whatever, because ultimately the show guidelines rule, although they have to incorporate the local rules. They can be stricter. So for instance, there are some medical shows that have already said they're going to require, either a test or a proof of vaccination, regardless of what the city or the state is saying are the guidelines. And the show guidelines are frequently changing, so you have to watch for updates, right? Because most of them are publishing something along the lines of, we're going to follow local guidelines or CDC guidelines, or some version of that. They may not be telling you specifics right now, because whereas virtually every show a month ago might have said you need a mask. That may not be the case in a lot of cities now, or it may be the option of that show manager knowing their attendees and their exhibitor profiles to say, we're still requesting that you wear a mask. And then when it comes to workers and employees, we all have to follow the show rules and the venue rules, along with whatever rules our employer sets, right? So our employers may have guidelines as well, and they may require protocols that are not required by the show or the facility. So
yeah, and Julia, can I just say too, like, there was an OSHA call for California today.
Yes.
On that same thing, and we're trying to stay on top of all that too, because it is very different, especially if we send people to travel for the show. Like, it's very confusing on a lot of levels, but being safe is the best way. But it's like we don't know who's in charge.
Well, and what I would say to simplify it is ultimately the show is responsible for publishing the rules that incorporate whatever the laws are that are in place. So the show rules are the first place, and then of course knowing if your employer requires anything else. I see Jacqueline said 2 of my clients are requesting new additional exhibits because of the compressed time frame. So yes, there may be some advantage there. They'll be lighter and less detailed to get them through the show floor. So yeah, good for you, bad for me. but yeah, I think there's a lot of how do we get through this year, and again, to your point, there are a lot more shows in a shorter period of time, and so your clients might have overlaps that they didn't have before, because shows that were in the first and second quarter have moved to the third and fourth quarter. And then Ross, I see that you mentioned, World of Concrete. And yes, I heard the exact same thing and saw a lot of the same photos, was that, it was largely an unmasked event and with very high attendance. So, and I think that's, partly the personality of that particular show, and certainly the location. So this is something we're all going to have to work together to keep track of, right? To make sure that none of your people show up at show site with a misunderstanding or having given your clients the wrong guidance, because the last thing you want to do is get caught in a bind from that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that contractors have been doing in the meantime. We haven't been sitting around. Well, those of us who have been working have definitely not been sitting around over the last year. So next slide, Emma, if you could. We have been busy reviewing all of our processes and procedures over the course of the last year. And so, someone in my company has a, analogy of you don't change the tires on the bus when it's speeding down the freeway, right? So the bus has been parked for a large, 14 months or so. So we've had a chance to rotate the tires and look under the hood and really look at everything we've been doing. And so a lot of what we're doing is seeing what we can simplify, right? And both for us and for our clients and exhibitors. So I'm sure you have all heard that a lot of contractors right now are introducing new types of pricing packages. For instance, per pound material handling rates, which can't be rolled out universally all at once on every show because a lot of shows have, unique aspects or the client's not comfortable with it yet, or it's a timing issue. But ultimately, when you see that on shows, it will make it way easier for you to do budgeting for your clients, because those per pound rates, eliminate a lot of those surcharges that have made it so, or incorporate, so it makes it very, very easy for you to look at the per pound rate and be able to tell your client, this is going to be your freight budget. We've also issued one for electrical because we recognize that one of the real pain points for exhibitors is, okay, I've ordered an outlet, but I didn't know how to budget for the labor, the extension cords, the plug strips, plus. So we've taken some of the most predictable orders and bundled them. So you pay one price and get, a lot of the equipment and ancillary, labor that is provided. And obviously there are certain jobs that require a lot more labor that cannot be, bid as a package, but, a lot of your standard outlets will be bundled on a lot of shows in the future, and that should make it easier for you. And, we're looking at all kinds of other opportunities like that. One of the other things that we certainly did during the pandemic is say, okay, how can we make it easier for whether it's exhibitors or their partners to get the exhibitor services that they need without having to come stand in line at a service desk. And so we've gone to a fully contactless exhibitor service. It doesn't mean that we don't have a desk there and you can't talk to a person if you want to, but virtually everything can be done online via text, et cetera, including filling out bills of lading, which I know has been a big pain point in the past. With forcing someone to fill out the 3-part form or 4-part form or whatever and bring it up to the desk and et cetera. So I think you'll see a big improvement in some of those areas simply because we have the time to take a look at them. We're also participating in a lot of educational webinars to try and help our clients come up to speed with what's new and what we're seeing. Most contractors have instituted, at least temporarily, more liberal exhibitor refund policies for things like, canceling when there's a show cancellation or postponement, et cetera. We're providing a lot of exhibitor resources. In fact, if you go to any service manual that we produce right now, there's a full exhibitor resource page that, gives some tips on things and, vocabulary words and things that a new exhibitor may need assistance with. And then, as I mentioned before, a lot of contractors are doing a lot of research and sharing other resources. So, it's out there. Take advantage of it. Use it because it's to benefit all exhibitors and their partners. So next, I want to talk a little bit about what ESCA is doing right now. And I know you all know who ESCA is, but next slide, please. Exhibition Services and Contractors Association recently announced what they call an all-in initiative. And I'm sure you have all heard and had your own concerns about, what happens when we all return to work and we go from, 0 to 100 in a short period of time. How do we ensure that there's labor available? How do we ensure that the facilities are staffed up, hotels, et cetera? So this is a joint initiative between employers, facilities, labor, other stakeholders in that industry to do things like training, communication, and other information. There was actually a very good ESCO webinar yesterday that included a lot of these parties talking about what they are doing right now to prepare for these busy times, or what they have already done. It should be posted on ESCO's YouTube channel within a day or two. If you want to go to the next slide. They also have had a couple of meetings and have some great things on YouTube and the ESCA site, where they really talk about, again, how are we all going to be working together? We have to be flexible. We have to look at unique partnerships. We have to, plan, and communicate. So that ties into, also making sure that we have the resources financially and that the industry is supported. So if you'll go to the next slide, many of you had been familiar in the past with either Exhibitions Day, which was sponsored by IAEE, the International Association for Exhibitions and Events, or Go Live Together, which was the lobbying effort that was launched particularly at the beginning of the pandemic to address the unique, crisis that we had at that point in time. Well, they have all merged into one initiative, which is called the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance, and hired a professional lobbyist who will be full-time looking out for our best interests on the Hill and participating in, things like Exhibitions Day, which took place in June, which typically is an in-face lobbying day on the Hill to go up and talk about issues that are impacting the health and future of the exhibitions industry. In this case, it was a virtual day, but they set up, conference calls with either staff or congressional leaders and senators, et cetera, and spoke to the unique, crisis that we have been in. The current initiative is to work on something called the Hospitality and Commerce Job Recovery Act. And so that's the focus at this point in time, but it has brought organizations from all over the industry together in this one lobbying effort. And I'm sure EDPA is actively involved as well. So I wanted to share with you real quickly some of the resources that are out there, just in case you're trying to get some background on what the industry as a whole is doing. And I know if you're like me, over the course of the last year or two, your inbox is just bombarded with emails and lobbying information and e-newsletters, et cetera. It's hard to sort through all of it. So I just have kind of listed a few of my favorite resources. One of them, if you're not familiar with it, there is a group called the Events Industry Council, which is a coalition of all the major industry organizations, and their role is not only the CMP designation, but a lot of accepted practices, what they call APEX. They have an APEX glossary, if you've heard of that. What they did during the beginning of the pandemic was form a COVID recovery task force and started to develop all these guides that aggregated and pulled together all the great information that was out there in the industry in one place and developed a series of guides. The one pictured here is the flip book for B2B and B2C exhibitions. I'm kind of proud of that. I was on that task force, and it's a great flip book to go through and get all kinds of information. But they also published, meetings and event design, workforce and wellness, health and safety, info for hotels, and crisis communication worksheets, code of conducts, business continuity, travel and transportation, et cetera. And these are all free resources. If you go to eventscouncil.org and go to their COVID resources, you can access any of these guides. They are all e-flip books that you can go through and just kind of see what is going on there. And they're designed to be live work streams so that they can be updated, because as we know right now, a lot of this information is, like I said, I was talking about spacing on floor plans 2 months ago, and a lot of these things are going to be obsolete before too long. Next slide, please. This is just some of the things that are included in that Apex guide for B2B and B2C exhibitions. They have kind of a state of the exhibition sector, impact on stakeholders, how to do risk assessment, info on different event formats. Obviously, we're a global industry, so every one of these guides was written with a global outlook and the phases of recovery. Collaborations such as key questions, including questions to pose to exhibitors. Protocols and case studies. And I think we're all really looking for case studies right now. Next slide. And this is just an example of the, the spreadsheet that, or the page that shows the questions to ask stakeholders. And so again, when you have some time, go look at these flip books and see if they don't give you some insight and because I think it really helps to know where the organizers are coming from and what their unique challenges are right now. Obviously, I mentioned IAEE earlier. They have now published their third version of the essential considerations for safely reopening. That's available on their website. Next slide, please. SISO, if you don't know SISO, it's the Society of Independent Show Organizers. So they would be the large, multi-management for-profit show organizers that have many, many brands under their umbrellas. And SISO has been doing a lot of case studies of the shows that have been produced so far. So that's a really good site, under their COVID resources tab to find case studies. For instance, I know they commissioned one on World of Concrete, which should be up on the site soon. They did one on the joint show that happened in, early on in Florida with 3 different show producers co-locating. And so there's a lot of good information on case studies on the SISO site, and then just some other general COVID resources. Next page. In addition to the all-in program that I mentioned, ESCA also has a health and safety guideline. And they have regular webinars, as I mentioned, and they record them and they're available for viewing through their YouTube channel. And then last but not least, I mentioned a few other COVID-19 resources here that I think are valuable. There's an industry all secure guideline that was a collaboration between a number of major show organizers who put together, what they consider, guidelines for reopening. UFI, which is an international organization, put together a global framework. IAVM, which is the International Association of Venue Managers, has resources. And then CORT, there have been a lot of, I think, suppliers that have been really very forward thinking and putting together resources. And CORT has, and this is one of the images from their website, they have done a lot of work on designing safe environments, whether it's an exhibit booth or a show management area, and down to including furnishings to select that are easy to wipe off, for instance, or they have lots of different plexi screens in different sizes, and just a lot of great ideas on layout of their furnishings. So with that, I'll switch to the next slide and how you can help, because it's really important that all of you recognize the impact that you and your clients can have on the success of the show. So as we mentioned before, providing your clients with the most current guidance is really critical. And then encouraging your client to provide the organizer with good information, because some of our clients, are kind of holding back and aren't sharing what they're doing. And it's really hard for organizers to plan. More than ever, it's really critical to provide the official contractors with solid information, whether it's freight estimates, hanging sign information, electrical requirements, booth orders, et cetera, because as we are planning on much shorter cycles and trying to figure out what the staffing requirements are, how many of you are back to full staff right now? Is there anybody? That's great. So there are a few of you that are, but I'm sure that the majority of us are not in this industry, and certainly the official contractors are not back to full staffing. We are bringing staff back as the work requires it. And I think we're probably all in that strange, unique, situation right now where we've got lots of work to produce, but not the revenue to go with it yet, because until you produce the show, you don't have the income. So we've been doing a lot of, juggling staffing, trying to figure back, when to bring them back in certain cities, depending upon the schedule in those cities. We expect that the show schedule will be as one of the gentlemen in our company calls it lumpy through the fall. And so it's really hard to figure out when to bring your full-time people back when you don't have the work to support that. So you've probably heard we have a flex program to bring people back on a project basis first, or as needed. But it's really important that the contractors, the facilities, et cetera, have good, accurate information. And I've heard this come up on a couple of calls recently with clients that that their exhibitors don't want to share their target list with the organizer to help the organizer bring those clients to the show. Everyone's very protective of their lists, right? So whatever you can do to encourage your clients to share a target list with the organizer to help get the attendance to the show is really valuable. Obviously, as discussed, providing your client with a variety of tools for success, affordable options, and then I think we have to help our clients have reasonable expectations, right? I mean, it's not, the first show is not going to be, I hate that normal, thing, but the reality is it's going to be a while before shows are exactly the way they were before. And the attendance will probably be a little lower. The traffic will probably be lower. Some of the things that have been offered in the past may not be offered. So setting reasonable expectations and then measuring, analyzing, and providing good feedback so that the show organizer can see what really worked and what different, and tweak it for 2022, which we hope will be a lot closer to normal. So that leads me to the next slide, which is, if you build it, will they come? And, just within a couple of months ago, the types of things that a lot of our clients were hearing were things like, well, I'm in, but my company's travel policy may not let me come, or I don't know, I'm checking my budget. I'm not going to know for a while, maybe, but I'm going to wait and see who else is coming. Waiting to see how the events before this one go. I'm thinking about attending virtually. I think even in the last month, it's become way more optimistic and way more definite. Attendance patterns have definitely been trending up in the last month. But again, they still are based on industry, location, timing, event, and just attendee profile and other factors. For instance, when did, an area open up? And of course, we all know in California here, we're going to lag behind a lot of the country just because show organizers had to make decisions about whether to go forward with their events months ago, and not knowing when the state would open up. We're in a similar situation to, much of the Northeast, in that, you could only hang on for so long before deciding whether to either postpone or cancel your event. So with that, I have some questions for you on the next slide. I'm hoping you all will give me a break in talking right now and what you're seeing and hearing. What are you hearing from your clients? What does the summer and fall participation look like? What do their budgets look like? How about your planning and decision cycles? Are they making you wait way longer before pulling the trigger and spending with you? Are you or they making decisions based on research, or is it just kind of gut right now? And how do your clients plan to measure success?
I'm happy to jump in. Hi, Julia. It's Amanda Helgamo.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'd love to answer a couple of these questions. I can answer it both from my client base, which is pretty diverse in different industries, but I can also answer it on behalf of an exhibitor advocacy group that I'm part of that represents 15. We have about 15 brands, and each brand, they're across industries, and they each have pretty robust programs. So, but I had a question before I could answer some of these questions for you. I want to go back, and I apologize, I was 10 minutes late, so I'm not sure if you covered this, to the trends, your trend slide. I was curious about one of the bullets on there that said that you're hearing that clients are having an interest in turnkey packages. That's not something, we're actually hearing the opposite. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that for a second.
I think this tends to be less the exhibitors that have a relationship with a designer or producer like yourselves, and more the exhibitors that tend to be kit order exhibitors anyway, your 10 by 10s and your 10 by 20s, where, they're in some cases not even wanting to send in their pop-up. They really are hoping that, something really easy, whether it's just a tabletop or whatever, can be provided for them. I think that's hopefully much less of a trend for your exhibitor base.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, obviously, if I'm representing the exhibitor advocacy group in EDPA, I'm also on the board of EDPA, we would be very concerned about that. Certainly that puts all of us on the call out of business. But our exhibitors, they, across the board, they need to be able to choose their supplier partners. And more importantly to that, I saw something like this happen a few years ago where a couple companies tried to do this, a couple general contractors, and they surveyed a bunch of clients within the pharmaceutical industry. And, I saved the quote and across the board, they need to be in a position where they can create experiences and engage the market. They can't do that if they're limited to a package in a show kit. So I just want to make sure that you're aware, and feel free to bring back to your
general. Yeah, there's no overarching or general trend towards that. No,
Okay, well, because we've seen it come out on a couple shows, and we're very concerned, and we're going to be sending letters out to the show organizers to let them know that the exhibitors are very concerned and actually disturbed about that option, because it's essentially a closed show floor. None of us on the phone are allowed on the show floor, and that's certainly something that would put our businesses at risk. Certainly coming off the heels of what we've all been through in this pandemic, we wish to not see that happen.
Yeah, no, I think the situations you're talking about are very isolated one-off situations. So I don't think there's any general trend. I think, again, this is more, your kit order type exhibitors.
And then I can answer your question. This is something we talk about frequently in the last couple of months as far as the budgets. Budgets are going to be a problem. And the main reason, as I'm sure you're fully aware, is the amount of money that they've been spending on the virtual or the digital, although it's certainly significantly less than what they spend on their live events. They're now looking at it, right? And they're saying everything you just talked about. And they're saying, okay, well, when we go back to live and we want to go back to our, the same events, we simply can't do it. We're going to either have to shrink our booth space, or we're going to have to, eliminate some shows in order to cover the costs on both sides of the equation that, with these hybrid shows. So that's definitely, I can speak very loudly about that. And that's something that the reason why we've asked, and we're right now really trying to get show organizers and associations to look at some of these old antiquated business models and change some of them, so that, we can make room, the exhibitors can make room for their budgets to have both, in order to operate in this new world. So those are two of the things that really stand out for me in the discussions that we've been having pretty much across the board with our exhibitor base.
Well, and to your point, since we are trying to help the show organizers manage their budgets, we're trying to help them understand what's happening on the show floor, which does impact that business model.
Right.
Absolutely. So, yeah.
Hey, Julia,
and I'm happy to send the white paper, Julia, that they wrote 2 months ago. If you'd like to read it, I'm happy.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's posted on the EDPA website, but I'm happy to forward that to you if you've not seen that yet.
Yeah, that would be great. I have not.
Great.
Julia, can you hear me? Okay, I don't know if you. I've got a speaker and a microphone, and so I wasn't quite sure. So I have a question. My name is Barry Poland, by the way, with Image Options, and we're seeing a lot of momentum coming back, and fortunately for us, we're very busy. A lot of it is in the EGD space and the environmental graphic design and the corporate, corporate build outs. And we're seeing the event stuff start to pick up, but it's lagged behind the retail and the corporate environments.
Right.
And I think very quickly we're going to see no limitations on how we go back, right? So I think we're going to see it. We're going to see as the opportunity to be back to business as usual really quick. My concern, and I'm curious if there's any metrics or understanding of this, is we all want to get back, but has there been a question about ROI and interest from the exhibitors themselves? From the, are they still gung-ho in spending that incredible amount and budget on these shows after they've now survived without that for such a significant period of time? And that's one of my concerns that no one talks about.
We all share that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. And I was going to say, it really doesn't get talked about. We talk about, the opportunity for things, shows are coming back. But I was looking at a show in Vegas coming up in September. And I was looking, or no, I think it was, I can't remember for sure. And I was looking at the number of empty booths in the show. It was SEMA. And I was looking at the number of empty spaces and, with no limitations, it's still, I would say almost 40% open. So I don't know. I mean, that was just.
Yeah, so some of that may just be the cycle, because if they'd already eliminated that money from their budget and they're on a calendar year cycle, they may not be able to put it back in, right? So I think that's what we're all going to see through the rest of this year is when was the budget built? And also, there still are corporate travel restrictions in place with some companies. I agree with you. Long term, there is a concern. I have certainly spoken to some of my organizer clients who have spoken to exhibitors who said, okay, over the last year, we took our exhibit budget and we spent some of it here, we spent some of it here, we spent some of it here. You're going to get some of that back, but you're not getting all of that back because we tried this and it works. So they've been, experimenting with all these other channels of marketing, and we may not get all that money back right away. It may be, okay, I still want to participate, I still want to be there, but I'm going to try a smaller footprint, or my budget is now, half of what it was before.
Yeah, so I think the challenge on those of us who are invested in this coming back fully is how do we prove that value out? And so that they don't just write it off as just a really, expensive boondoggle, which I mean, is, that's my concern, is how we prove that out and show them the ROI so they get back as quickly as possible. Well,
and, again, there are a lot of organizations such as CERA, the Center for Exhibition Industry Research, and, the various contractors and IAEE and other groups that are doing constant measurements. So I think a lot of it is sharing that information. Also, I think really encouraging show organizers to put together good surveys and gather good data so that you've got data to take back to your clients. It's all going to be data driven in my mind. So not every exhibitor is good at proving their own case. We have to help them prove the case, right? We have to hand them the tools to prove the case, because it just may not be in their wheelhouse. If that's, we know, there are many companies that people that handle the exhibits don't really have a background in it, or they're doing it with 5 other jobs, right? So that's where you come in, or I come in, or whatever, to help them, collect the data and the tools that they need to keep coming back and coming back in a meaningful way. And it may be showing them, other options to get visibility through sponsorships or other activities. I see Matthew commented and said, we can't confuse survive with thrive. Some companies are doing what they can with their budgets, so that they can survive right now, but until consumer confidence and spending return, the thrive element is still hanging out there. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is absolutely a rebuilding year.
Yeah.
And
I think too,
not everybody's made it. I'm sorry, Gina, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to comment too, when you were saying, we're seeing that the people that are being hired back aren't necessarily the same people they're less educated in the trade show world. So I have been their teacher in a lot of the ways on how to look at the book, or how to look at what is drayage, what, I'm back to 0-1 with a lot of people. So patience, and I'm finding value in that for me as a vendor, because I'm able to help them more. They're going to rely on me more, right?
Right.
But
Right.
we are seeing they're hiring less experienced people back, because maybe those other people found a job, I don't know, maybe somewhere else, or who was doing the job before. That's what we're seeing.
It might be priorities too.
Yeah.
Money. Multitasking. It might be the right skill set. You're right. It might be money.
Mhm.
I mean, truly, there's no question that there are people that were in this industry that found 9-to-5 jobs that they like, right? They got an opportunity to see
their passion. They found their passion, and it wasn't trade shows.
I know. Imagine that, just because we're lifers doesn't mean everybody is, right? So we're gonna see a lot of that. This is going to be one of those years that we're all going to have to take a deep breath and try not to be reactive and try to support each other for the greater good of the industry, right?
So one of the this Matthew, one of the things we learned that we just had at EDPA Engage, and one of the statistics that was shared with us was 17 million Americans have changed careers over the course of the pandemic.
Wow.
And they're predicting that another 25% of people are going to make a change by the end of the year.
Well, aren't you glad you're not in commercial real estate right now? Yeah, because obviously one of the major things that's driving the ability for people to change jobs is the industries that are now saying you can work from anywhere.
I've changed careers 3 times in the past year at the same company with this pandemic. Selling medical supplies.
I'm just doing 3 jobs at the same company, but that's
yeah, well, exactly. We were selling face masks, then medical gowns, and then transaction. Yeah.
If you consider mixologist for a personal mixologist for myself a career change,
yeah,
I'll take that on.
I've become a bourbon
I've been a
specialist.
cat wrangler a large part of it. I had to shut her out so she didn't introduce herself during the webinar. But let's see. Amanda shared the Exhibitor white paper. Thank you. I will find that on the EDPA website under advocacy. Gina mentioned it would be great to use our EDPA LinkedIn page to share any information about this type of stuff with the whole group. We're in it together. Absolutely, etc. What else? Any other sharing you want to do? Venting, info?
Yeah, this is Vince. One thing that I haven't heard talked a whole lot about is the attendees. We pretty much know that the exhibitors want to come back to the show floor. The show organizers want to produce shows. Do the attendees really have a need to go back to the show floor and buy in that way? Or have they found a new way to buy wholesale online? Are they finding other avenues? And is there, or do you know of any, or could there be produced any kind of a marketing plan for our industry to let attendees primarily know the value of exhibitions?
That's an excellent question. I don't know, but I will certainly ask some of my industry peers. Certainly, individual show organizers are working really, really hard at this piece of it. And I kind of alluded to it at the beginning and on the last slide that, the exhibit space is selling. Now we just have to hope that the bodies come, right? Because otherwise the exhibit space isn't going to sell next year. And I think that's been one of the balancing act that a lot of organizers had early on who were planning to come back, and maybe were planning to come back earlier than their audience was comfortable with. And started selling space, but then maybe the attendees weren't coming at the right pace, and so they opted to postpone or cancel till next year. I'm sorry?
I said I'm tracking the shows, and they're still canceling in the fall because
either some of them are.
Either they're going back to their old show rotation, or they're not getting enough sales from the exhibitors. But I think if the exhibitors will be there if there are enough attendees on the floor. If there are not enough attendees, eventually they're going to go away.
Well, that's true. And I think that's one of the balancing acts organizers have to do. And obviously organizers have to make sure that they're going to meet their budgets before producing a show. And so most of them have, you have fixed costs and you have, variable costs. And if you can't cover your fixed costs, then maybe it's let's do the show when it's more normal. But I will tell you, we're looking at a pretty robust schedule in the fall. Feel good about a lot of events. I personally have several events that I'm working on that are close to their normal size in a number of different cities. So yes, there have certainly been, a lot of shows that have opted to cancel or postpone to go to their normal. And part of that ends up being too, if you can't get in a certain cycle, whether it's it might be the buying cycle for the attendees, if it's a retail show, it might be too close to a competitor's show. It might be too close to next year's show. And so they don't want to risk damaging the 2022 show by having a 2021 show that is too close. A lot of different reasons that, we've had a lot of conversations with a lot of organizers in their decision process during the last year. And it's not always as simple as who's coming and who's not. There are a lot of factors they're looking at. And I'm more optimistic today than I was yesterday.
Right.
And, I would say that every day for the last month. So, and then just concluding with my last slide there is just, I think that, the theme has been that, 2021 event success is dependent upon transparency, flexibility, creativity, reinvention, altered expectations. Recovery is a process. It doesn't happen all at once. So, we all have to recognize that and really help managing, our clients' expectations, et cetera. So thank you, and happy to participate in any other conversation or.
Terrific. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This was super informative, and we'll have a copy of the presentation available if anybody wants it. So just let me know. We'll probably have it posted with the website link of the recording of this on the website when later on. But cool. Does anybody else have any other questions, comments? Awesome. Well, I'm sure, as the year progresses, we might have less and less time for these things. So I'm glad we're able to get more and more of them in now. So
hopefully there'll be success stories that you'll be sharing and that kind of thing. So yeah, I hope that's where we are in a couple of months, right?
For sure. I'd like to thank you, Julia. This was super great for you to join us, and thank you for everybody for signing on. And you guys have a great week. The rest of the week, tomorrow, next weekend. How's that? And we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Emma, thanks.